everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the extraordinary honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist for Rebel Crush, choreographer, physiotherapist, so many things that I could hardly describe them all, Anna Achimowicz.
Yes. Hello, Raul. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, Anna. So there's so much to talk about, but as always, we like to start with the bass side of things. How did you get started in music and on bass?
Quite honestly, music and playing bass has been the very last and current addition to my over 22 artistic career so far. I've been in medicine for the last 15 years, dancer, performer, stage professional, artist, name it as you will, since age 6. And quite honestly, I went into bass playing the last 2.5 years. Essentially, the whole pandemic, I've been nothing but shredding metal and thrash riffs and digging into equipment and stuff. But in 2016, I actually grabbed the guitar, which out of nowhere, as we know, one of those ideas that came upon me. I wanted to, not wanted, but I felt that after 15 years of producing stage pieces, choreographies, productions, very much physical bass, a lot of fashion, a lot of styling, a lot of very eclectic, if you will, elements together, I always felt that some element was missing because I wasn't into music per se in my early days at school. That passion pretty much was killed quite quickly by my teacher, which was a mathematician as well. So it was just, you know what? This doesn't speak to me. I'm bored. I hate it. It was one of those things. So I kind of ended up being a professional dancer. But somehow in 2016, and the song Dream On by Aerosmith over and over played in my head. And after a full night being awake, the next morning, it kind of clicked. Oh my God, playing guitar, rock dance theater. I named it later. And I kind of collected and connected all of the elements that were pretty much passions of my whole life, being a rocker, being kind of a rebel personality, always finding my own individual way and just being expressive and loud on stage. So that was the official kind of start. But funny enough, I always tended to go to the rhythmic, trancey kind of side of music, not necessarily playing the leads. Mm-hmm. It always kind of stressed me out. I was like tensing on my butt. I'm just gonna mess it up. But I did play the bass leads and the rhythms just on the E string of the guitar, which I actually figured out quite later when I grabbed the bass. And then it was just like a natural merit. So quite honestly, it's one of those things that the bass found me. It's not like I picked the bass. It just happened to come at an appropriate time, I guess, to kind of extend my career, my expression, my fascination for just connecting my two worlds, which is medicine and arts on a wide spectrum. So the long story short, it kind of happened like that.
There you go. Well, and are you pretty much self-taught?
I am, very much so. I cannot read chart music whatsoever. I'm a very physical person, so it's essentially, checking out what the hell is the bass player doing.
Yeah.
I do have a good ear, I must say. I just pick up on things and it just feels organic and natural to me. But I think that's also because of my education in dance and in contemporary physical theater and all of that, which essentially I worked with music my whole entire life. So rhythm is always there with me, like tapping on anything or just kind of having my own internal rhythm, which is what we learn as a contemporary dancer. You work with rhythm, with the breath, with pause, with sustain, with dynamics. So essentially it's exactly the same, just you happen to have 4 or 5 or however many strings to work with. So to me, it's just like an extension of the body. And it's just fascinating to learn lines and figure out styles or fingerings. I'm a pick player. I'm one of those aggressive, physical, players. I'm not into that whole hype, snobbish finger playing or not. Finger playing to me personally, as Anna, as Rebel Crush, is a little bit clumsy to me. I love just digging into the strings and being loud and obnoxious and hence the pick.
Well, it's all part of the choices and it goes with the music that you're trying to play. And, there are some even jazz players that play with picks. It's just
absolutely. Whatever serves the song or your style or your essence, essentially what is needed.
Totally.
As a bass player. Yeah.
Totally. And the sonic qualities that you get from the pick are more digging and more cutting, more more staccato, if you will, kind of, getting to the point there. But as we also look at the fascinating blend, because with a background with medicine and your involvement with the arts, specifically the physicality of it, I think for a lot of our people here in the United States, they won't know what a physiotherapist does. What is a physiotherapist?
Well, probably in the terminology, a physiotherapist is an equivalent of a physical therapist, a PT.
Mm-hmm.
But in Europe, with my education, I have a diploma in Bachelor of Sciences with a lead in physiotherapy. So here we have a much wider spectrum of treatment tools, let's say knowledge that is way broader, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
So you can essentially do treatment mainly with your hands, with other tools, with all sorts of apparatuses. And on top of that, I happen to fall in between the cracks because not only I graduated from a medical university with my Bachelor of Science, but at the same time, back in the day when I was learning contemporary dance and just working with choreographers and artistic directors from all the planet, they happen to be body workers, massage therapists, chiropractors. They did applied kinesiology or whatnot, or gyrotonics and gyrokinesis, which I'm also a licensed trainer in. So all of that kind of gave me both sides of medicine. So let's say most of the physiotherapists that finish school, they have a little bit wider knowledge, if you will. I happened to have been working with the body my whole entire life, implementing other methods and other techniques that are not strictly in medicine register, but they're semi-therapeutic, they're body re-education, they're body awareness techniques, body-mind centering, for instance. So all of that kind of was blending me, and still does along the years, with just fusing all of the best of the techniques and the methods, so that I created my own protocol, if you will. Physiotherapy for rock stars, which I called, and I think soon enough I'm going to I can actually disclose it. It's not officially registered yet. Nobody is going to snatch the idea because no one knows what's inside my head, but I'm working on establishing an ANA activation method,
okay,
so to speak, which, essentially is going to be a hybrid, and my whole background and experience working with artists, working with musicians, treating them, re-educating them. I do a lot of seminars as well as a part of my physiotherapy path and career. So it kind of comes full circle and derives around that. So
gotcha. Well, as a human being myself, I recognize the effects of our activities on the body. And also as we age, how things change, because like I remember picking up some of these basses. You pick up some of these mahogany rock basses that are 14 pounds, and you're going, well, that's nice, but I couldn't play this for more than a few minutes because
I know
it's too heavy. And talking to other musicians that either if they were playing extended range, so 6-string, 8-string, weight is a consideration and how this is affecting their body, or if they are carrying gear, because that's also, for a lot of performers, they don't have the luxury of having somebody who carries their amps and all of this stuff. And so then they're looking to cut down on weight. And all of this comes back to, we own bodies, and those require care by somebody that recognizes the rigors and the punishment that performers are subjected to. And you're perfectly situated for this because you're familiar with the instrument, but also you have all of this background and training. And so you even have a course series to help people learn about this. Tell us a little about that, body management for bass players.
Well, essentially, it's also a course, a very practical course giving bass players. I mean, I have the whole series for body management, which is split for bass players, for drummers, for vocalists, for dancers. Essentially, it's the best ofs from the techniques that I give to bass players so that they kind of can auto-diagnose, auto-pinpoint all sorts of chronic compensations, body habits, but not only habits, but especially, dysfunctions on a neurological level. Essentially, we do a bunch of tests that are practical, be it on the muscles, be it having the bass strapped on, standing, sitting, whatever position of playing you use, because of course we have jazz players, we have thrashers and rock and rollers and metalheads. And all of those require a different kind of repetitive motion. And essentially, it all starts that bass playing is like a highly athletic sport. That's what it comes down to, and that's what I give across. And then with all of the tools, essentially, bass players can check on their own body what's wrong and how to correct it in a very quick, efficient way. I always give homework that is just a couple of minutes because, as we know, life of a musician, be it on tour or studio or recording or just even as a hobby, it's time. Time, ergo money, ergo commitment, and all of those things. So I try to keep it short and sweet. So it's usually only one thing for nerve stimulation, one thing for activation, and something holistic depending on their particular requirement as a priority. So if someone is dehydrated, we focus on the lymph system. If someone has migraines constantly, then we look at a lot around the skull and the bite and the teeth and everything that is happening in the cranial system. So it all varies depending on the situation, but it's a very cool. We have a lot of fun with this because it's super interactive. I also have a bass on me when I show and demonstrate things. Of course, I have a couple of slides to kind of pinpoint elements about functional connections in the body, a little bit about anatomy, but in a very simple, music-oriented and digestible way, because let's face it, bass players, they want to play, they want to rock, they want to sound good and feel good. They couldn't care less about anatomy and books and stashes of theory. So this body management course that I developed is essentially the language that is applied specifically for bass player needs and artistic needs, and it pretty much varies from the mainstream, if you will, of medicine that approaches everything on a pain level and quick solution. Well, for instance, in the body management course series and in the workshops, pain is one of the last elements that we look at, which is always a big question. I'm like, wait, what do you mean? I have pain in my elbow, in my shoulder. Like, why are we looking at this from a different perspective? And that's where it all starts, that the pain in your elbow is far away from your elbow as an initial source of the problem. So, and that's where it goes interesting.
Got you. I'm sure there's folks that are listening to this and they're saying, where do I find this?
My official website, actually, Performing Arts Medicine, I think it's Achimowicz/Band-Aid. If you put in my name and physiotherapy for rock stars or Band-Aid, music Band-Aid program, it's going to direct you to all of the social media, to all of the main websites, and it's findable for sure. So there is only one, which is a good thing. So.
Nice. Well, and I think it's especially useful because in Western medicine, and I won't go too deep, but the options are usually pharmaceutical, pretty much, and there's a lot of over-the-counter things, but it is so common that people tend to overlook the inherent problems with even over-the-counter medications. So if you're taking a lot of the non-steroidals, you can have gastrointestinal bleeding that goes with it, and it's kind of constant. I mean, even
if only.
Yeah, simple aspirin, the side effect is blood thinning and gastrointestinal bleeding. If you stick with Tylenol, then you've got hepatic issues. Your liver has struggles and has its problems. So when you can find non-pharmaceutical options that help, and not to get into even the whole narcotics or controlled substance, because we all know that is also a big problem, and it has claimed many very good musicians when it'll come back and they'll go, okay, cause of death was fentanyl or a combination of other medications. Yeah. You kind of go, there had to be other ways. And so it is so encouraging that there are options, but people need to know about it. I think that's the thing. And many of our audience is situated in the United States, and so they wouldn't have the virtue of maybe finding you locally. As again, sometimes if you can stumble literally across the right person and they go, well, you don't need to take pills, you could do this, you go, wow, that's a great option, but this has worldwide reach, so this is excellent.
Well, luckily, I also do call-in, telemed consultations, which, Of course, it's not the same because essentially the word comes down to me working with my hands and doing anything in terms of corrections, activations, all sorts of things that I just correct on the body as I go with each bass player. But very, very true, like you said, Not only the pharma side of the problems is massive, but the other side of the spectrum at the same time is just basic lack and essential knowledge of a quick fix is not a quick fix. It actually is going to cause long-term damage and quite honestly, very, very quickly side effects that not only kill circulation, blood circulation, you find all sorts of stress fractures and little necrosis areas around tissues, bones, joints, cartilage, and that oftentimes is irreversible, and already a surgical correction is then needed, which of course, as we know, for players, especially that tour, we could name even a recent ankle sprain of one of the performers in Slipknot, Mike Pfaff, if we can mention that. I've been looking a little bit into the analysis of the movement, and quite honestly, is one of the very many common injuries that happens. And of course, when you're on tour, what do you look first at? You look to get a quick fix because you're mid-tour. You cannot cancel. It's money, it's organization, it's a huge budget, and it's very problematic for everybody in that situation. And I've been in a situation like that where I got injured myself as an artist, being on tour or being mid-project, mid-rehearsal, and then, well, you got to do what you got to do at the same time at the moment to continue, but then you do pay the price. And oftentimes I do have bass players that had all sorts of steroid injections or all sorts of, essentially substance trials and errors, quite honestly, because they did need help at the moment. But had they found, information, let's say on me earlier or anybody else that is qualified, especially in understanding what actually bass players do and what an artistic career entails, the approach would be different. And that I find one of the most challenging elements, talking to tour managers, talking to orthopedic doctors, talking to the medical industry, period. There is no understanding of what a musician's lifestyle is, that it's repetitive motion, but that's not the problem. Nutrition is a huge factor. Emotional health, mental health, biochemistry. I work a lot with biochemistry myself, with orthomolecular medicine, where I also kind of test and check what is the direction that is needed in terms of supplementation. And quite honestly, it's all connected. And there's still the biggest problem that if you have a cervical problem, it's just the cervical spine. If you have a problem with your elbow, with any so-called tendinitis, a diagnosable bag of, elements, but it doesn't give you much. It's as if you would tell someone the car is broken. Yeah, great. There's a million parts and pieces of all sorts. Some pieces are metal, some are plastic, some are leather, some are whatever. Yeah. A hybrid of those. So that's essentially how the body works. It's all connected. I have a very holistic approach, and quite honestly, a lot of not only practicing medicine is involved in my lifestyle and career, but especially educating, talking to people like yourself, talking to people, just bringing awareness that a professional touring musician or even someone starting off needs professional tips, professional help, and it does start from the body. Forget about the $1 million gear and all the amazing bases and straps and equipment. That's secondary, and that's all fantastic because the technology has evolved and you have carbon fiber and all of the materials that are incredible and way lighter and more ergonomic for the body, but it does start from the body. And that's a huge encyclopedia, unfortunately. But if you're willing to learn, and I happen to be that example, actually, that I was very lucky early on as my performing career has developed. Like I said at the very beginning, I had the pleasure and the privilege to work with people and learn from people that have been also into medicine, that have been educated well, and I did not get many injuries early on that I would have a price to pay later for. So that's one of those elements that, the path was properly guided. But a lot of folks, as we know, especially nowadays, they look at someone shredding extremely well on YouTube. They just pick up the instrument and they try to copy and mimic that, picking up a lot of habits and not knowing how the body works. And then even, example, recently I had a bass player, I think from London, that had no idea about preparing the body, about warming up, and he had all sorts of problems, essentially from the waist up. Yeah. So we had to start from the very beginning. Okay, show me what you're doing. Okay, let's break this down. So It's quite fascinating how disconnected people are from their own body awareness. And like you said, again, as we started the discussion about pharma and over-the-counter medicine and just anti-inflammatories, it's a huge issue, but I think it's manageable with awareness, with education, and just talking, and practicing the hell out of the topic until things change. Hence, that's why we're here.
Absolutely. The problem with the medications is that they are for symptom management and they don't address the root cause of the problem necessarily. And so it's like Band-Aids. If you get shot, you could put a Band-Aid over the bullet hole.
That's a perfect analogy.
And you don't see a hole. And it may
and the internal bleeding.
It may not bleed as much, but you're not doing anything about what's going on inside. So these are all critical parts. Now, you did mention gear, and I know that it's probably the lowest of the things, but as I see your bass right behind you, tell us a little bit about what you're playing on.
Well, this is my pride and joy, actually. It's a vintage Iris bass, 1974. It's super weird because it's semi-hollow. It has these two single coils, four in a line, pretty simple, but quite honestly, it shreds. I happen to have David Ellison's signature strings from SIT, and I gotta tell you, this thing rips. It's not my stage instrument, it's rather for composing, because it's very old and it requires a lot of work. I've recently brought it to the doctor to do a little bit of fret positioning and to lower the neck, because it's been in a million hands probably. So I'm still, as I go, I'm learning about this instrument, but I really love it. I love Jackson basses because they play fast, they're high performance, they look cool, they're sharp, they're aggressive, and they just work with my personality. But this is actually the third bass that actually I came across, because coming back to the very beginning, the first bass that landed in my kitchen in 2019, that was the year where we still didn't have the pandemic. I was working on a hybrid project with a hand percussionist over in Spain. And when I came back after summer, a fretless bass landed in my kitchen. I think it was one of my friends that left it. And I specifically remember because it was the night after the concert of Disturbed. And I had the privilege to work with the guys at their show in Warsaw. So after the show, the bass landed in my kitchen. And I think it was this P bass, but a home operation Frankenstein. It had the guy chiseled down, or someone chiseled down the very bottom and something of the top of the body, so it was completely disequilibrated. It kept falling off of my lap, and it didn't hang well on my body. It just kept agitating me, and I'm a very organic person. It's essentially, sometimes I don't care about the logo. If it speaks to me, if it's organic, if it's original, no one has it, it's weird, it usually ends up in my hands. But that bass, it had something. So I swear to God, I tried it once, I got agitated, I put it down, and it spent half a year in my kitchen untouched, and that was not the moment to start playing really as something very, very committed. So I gave it away, and I swapped for a semi-black beauty. I think it was also an Iris semi-black beauty bass, also vintage. It was pretty old. It was around 80s, I think, that model. I can't remember which one it was. And that one was incredible. It had super great sustain. I think it was maple. The neck, it was a full body, super heavy. And for metal music and for rock and roll music, which is mainly my main passion, quite honestly, and most of the stuff that I love to play and even compose and just riff around and create on my own is mainly heavy rock, hard rock, and metal until thrash. So, and that bass I actually sold. It went into good hands to my friend, and now I think it's just kind of circling around Poland, Germany, or somewhere on tour, hopefully. So that was my in-between instrument. Of course, I'm in love with a bunch of Spectre basses and Jackson basses and all sorts of weird things. You know, sometimes you go on Reverb and you see something very vintage or something extremely custom from 2020, let's say, and oh my God, I want to have it. Even speaking of Jacksons, I recently fell in love with V-Mans. bass player from Slipknot, with V-Man's custom Jackson bass, with I think it's sparkling violet, with an interesting white finish around, something like that. And I just added to my wish list. Oh my God, I need one. So, it's one of those things. But currently, this is my pride and joy. It's been in multiple shows right now of Rock Dance Theater. I did a bunch of promotional photos for my stage shows, a couple of campaigns over the pandemic as well for supporting arts, and just a bunch of cover songs and cover projects. We did on this bass. I actually recorded and I played a cover of Ronnie James Dio's Holy Diver. Thank you.
Okay.
I played Holy Diver on this with a bunch of friends from Latin America, with Dave Maldonado, among others, a super cool percussionist from Mexico. So yeah, this is one of the elements, and let's see which one is going to be the next one to join the family. As we know, now we can travel it a little bit more. So a couple of months back, I was in Vienna. I stepped into one of my favorite music stores. They did not have many vintage basses, unfortunately. They had a bunch of guitars, which they specialize in. But I said, hey guys, you got my number, so next time just call me if something interesting comes into the shop. So it's one of those things. You're just kind of driven and led to these things. And I think with many of us, bass players, and especially in my life, it's one of those things that it just calls to me. It just appears, or I just get a gut feeling, hey, go to that store or pass through this place, and they just find those things. I don't know if you have that the same way, Raul, but that's definitely how it works with me.
You have a little bit of what is very commonly known as GAS, gear acquisition syndrome. And
GAS, I didn't know that. Oh
yes. So
that's a very cool acronym.
That is common in bass players, and I see all the symptoms. So that's our diagnosis for the moment. Well, Anna, before we go, what plans do you have for the future?
Well, plenty, because I'm always greedy for experiences, for just doing everything bigger, better, and stronger. Like I said, currently the body management course and series is kind of out on the market. It's bookable, for all sorts of situations, clinic, institutes, private groups, individuals. I'm working on actually a drummer series as we speak. I'm writing a couple of articles that is going to be for bass players, hopefully as a kind of an article review, kind of a compendium of best ofs as well.
Okay.
What to focus on, what to use. It's going to be open source. Currently, I could not care less to publish for a mainstream magazine purely because they block my creativity, and I don't feel like sticking to the criteria, so I just published that on ResearchGate on my Achimowicz medical profile, and that's it. It's there for people to use, for bass players to hopefully profit from, and not only bass players, musicians and artists, period. But at the same time, I'm always working on things, even working on riffs and writing lyrics and composing stuff and collaborating with a bunch of people from the United States, a bunch of my friends in Europe. So hopefully, when it's going to be ready and lined up to be born into the world, of course, you're going to be first to know. So currently, always a multitude of things, depending.
Excellent. And as always, we will include your websites. You're on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, mostly under Performing Arts Medicine EU. We'll make sure that we add those all in appropriately so people can find them. Thank you, Anna, for taking time to talk with us out of your busy schedule.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've seen her here, Anna Achimowicz.
Excellent.